Greetings and welcome to the Sunflower Bee channel. Now in today's video we will be discussing confirmation bias, and how I came to this idea, to the subject of this video, is because of Amy Coney Barrett. Now Amy Coney Barrett has been on my YouTube feed for about, I'd say 2 weeks.
Probably longer.
Yeah, probably longer. In my head it's 2 weeks. But I've been seeing her face everywhere. And yesterday, as I was watching her confirmation hearing, I was thinking to myself, there is clearly a divide between, the people in the Senate. You can see that the Democrats think alike and the Republicans think alike. Yeah. And both of them, no matter how many speeches I heard, it was the same thing regurgitated. And a lot of the time, it always is.
Yeah.
And the main reason why someone would hate Amy Coney Barrett would be because of their identity and where they think they stand on a political,
relative to her.
Yeah, relative to her, right? So Democrats generally don't want her. Republicans generally do, right?
Yeah.
And whilst thinking about that, I realized that a lot of it has to do with confirmation bias. Yeah. So you like her because you think your political view is right, and therefore because your counterparts think that she's a good candidate, she should fill the seat, you also think that she should fill the seat.
Yeah.
And you will nitpick every single thing that makes her, every single aspect of her that would make her a good candidate.
Yeah.
And dismiss all the others that kind of are iffy, right?
Yeah.
And the other side does the same thing. They just take everything that's bad and forget everything that's good about her. So I started asking you questions.
Yeah.
And then you kind of attempted to have a Socratic dialogue with me. So let's start with what confirmation bias is to you.
So confirmation bias is when you look at information that you agree with for the sake of reinforcing your view rather than critically thinking about what you're seeing.
Mm-hmm. And I guess I kind of have this negative view on confirmation bias.
Yeah.
Because having liked debating my whole life basically.
Yeah.
Confirmation bias is never something that you want to be caught doing, or even though you do it all the time, and it's very hard to basically not do it. And so whilst having this negative view of confirmation bias, and whilst also seeing that every single person that was speaking to the nation, to the United States on the topic of Amy Coney Barrett, I realized that we all do it. We all find ourselves seeing that the other one does it, whilst not realizing that we do it as well.
So you could say we have confirmation bias about confirmation bias.
Yes, we do. And you started asking me questions such as, okay, so how do you not have confirmation bias? I reply, well, by being objective. Objectivity to me seems like the ideal thing, right?
Yeah.
One should be objective. Even when you go to law school, objectivity when you're a judge is crucial.
Yes.
But also in regards to other things as well, right?
Yeah.
So for me, objectivity is the ideal. And you ask me, well...
Why?
Why, yeah.
Says who?
Says who, why? And I guess the why is always the most difficult question to answer, right? So, why is objectivity even good? Why do we strive to be objective? And I guess my response was just, when one is objective, one can see the truth. Right?
Well, insofar as it's possible to think. I think a problem, though, is, as we've discussed, we all have that confirmation bias. And it seems to a large extent our opinion on these individual issues is predicated on the fact that we have these tribal identities.
Yeah.
And because we have these tribal identities, and thus we identify with our group and seek confirmation bias inducing information to keep us in this, it seems somewhat impossible. And I think the goal of objectivity is to some extent to convince, for example, if I was objective, I theoretically should be able to convince you of my opinion. But we've just discussed the fact that my objectivity doesn't really matter because of your confirmation bias and your tribal identity.
Well, I think that when having discussions like these, what are you biased to?
Well, I mean, I'm aware of a long laundry list of positions and thoughts I hold, which I would formulate into ideological systems. And I am aware that you do the same thing.
Yeah.
And we're also informed by not just confirmation bias, but other biases, and most of them fallacious, such as you admire, say, Voltaire.
Yeah.
And so Voltaire thinking something would sway you more than someone you hate.
Yeah, well, that's the fact that, to me, he's an authority, right?
Yeah.
He's not like the authority, but I admire his way of thinking through the period that he was in, right? So, would you say you admire Buddha in a way, like...
Yeah, I have a certain amount of
yeah.
admiration for the Gautama Buddha.
Yeah.
That guy.
So, I think that to the extent that you admire Buddha, I think I admire Voltaire. I don't think everything that he wrote or said to a fault.
Yeah, obviously.
But I still do think that I forget what that's called, but believing something due to the authority.
The appeal to authority fallacy.
Yeah. So what were we even talking about?
We were talking about the confirmation bias, and I was saying I don't know if the premise for it being useful makes sense. Because objectivity, the point of being objective is you can more effectively communicate and convince people of your position.
Well, I think it's more than that as well.
Okay.
So when one is objective, in essence, they kind of, I think, my opinion, they detach themselves from themselves, right? So release their ego, kind of remove the identity of them. So you are no longer Alex, Christian, conservative, Anglo-Saxon, whatever.
Yeah.
You are Blob. You are unnamed, unknown, right? Kind of trying to see without all that baggage.
Very platonic of you.
Yeah, very platonic. So with that in a way, that blob doesn't really belong to a tribe, but does belong to the tribe of blobs.
So it's human. It's a soul.
Yeah, I wouldn't...
That's what Plato called it. But.
Sure, but I wouldn't say it, right now.
Okay.
So you kind of lose your identity. And with that identity, you lose that bias. Don't you? Don't you?
At least some of it.
Some of it. Most of it, I even think.
Yeah, right now I don't think we're to as great of an extent as normal arguing as Yavanna, the French liberal absurdist Christian, whatever your current self-description is.
Well, that's also something I was thinking about, is that that kind of bend, I think, is useful. You entertaining ideas in your head as a game, I think, is very useful whenever you're talking to somebody.
Yeah.
Because whether you like it or not, because I know a lot of conservatives don't like the idea of putting you in someone else's shoes. Because it's like, let's just say that the identity politics that is being played in the US is kind of like making people hate that type of argument, right?
Yeah.
Even though that type of argument sometimes is
Yeah.
pretty like useful, but not really useful. It can kind of like play with your opponent.
Yeah, as a logical appeal, not as a pathos appeal.
Mm-hmm.
Like when it's just, you should feel this way because if you were them, you'd probably feel. That's not an argument. But if it's saying if you entertain this system of thought, if you thought X, then wouldn't you think Y? So my point is if you're an Afghani American saying, wouldn't you feel bad that we're fighting your country? That's not really an argument.
Yeah, no, it's not. But
it's saying if you were a pacifist, wouldn't it follow that you'd be against the Afghan war?
Yeah.
That's obviously just an example I pulled out of nowhere. Sorry.
I mean, I don't know how you managed or how we managed to go into this discussion, but let's talk about like tribes and how they've evolved and how we belong to. I wouldn't even say we belong to a tribe anymore.
A tribe.
Yeah, we belong to